What's up, legends, and welcome to another First Impressions video. Today we're talking about Marvel Redemption Row, the new Unmatched set that has come out after being stuck in global shipping crisis hell for about 9 months. We were supposed to get this last summer, but what are you going to do? We have the set here now. It's on my shelf right there, and I'm so excited to talk about the characters today. I'm making individual videos for Luke Cage, Ghost Rider, and Moon Knight. So this is the Luke Cage video, as I'm sure you realized when you clicked on the thumbnail. I talk about the map for this set, the raft, in the Ghost Rider video. So if you're interested in my thoughts on that and the new mechanics in that geographical set, the items, go check out the Ghost Rider video at the beginning. I talk about that. This video is about Luke Cage. It's my first impressions on this character after getting a couple of plays in both in person and online during the last week or so. And there should be a caveat here. This is a first impressions video with minimal experience, so I'm just giving you my preemptive thoughts as a nice way to introduce this character into the meta. I'll talk about Luke's cards and how good I think some of them are and how to use them. And it's really just to start a discussion because, like I said, I've only played this character a handful of times. There just isn't enough data about matchups and things like that. No one really has that much experience with this character unless there's been someone secretly just like grinding Luke matchups for the last couple of weeks. So unless you're that person, I should say, if you're that person, congratulations. If you're like the rest of us who aren't crazy, although am I not crazy? Who knows? We're just gonna take a first look at this character, and please let me know what you think in the comments, because I could be totally wrong about something. I could be totally overreacting. I'm expecting to be wrong. You should take my words with a grain of salt. I think it's interesting to look at a character when they first come out, and then maybe in a year look back on them and see like what you were right about and what you were wrong about. I know for the Battle of Legends Volume 2 set, there were some inaccuracies with my first impressions video. I'll just leave it at that. And it's a fun experiment to do. Let's start with the card back because someone requested that I analyze them. Not analyze, I just showcase them more than I normally do. You can see Luke is punching through what looks to be debris or rocks. There's a hero for hire sign. I know nothing about the lore of these characters except for Ghost Rider. I know that he was a man named Nick Cage, and then the bees, and then it all went downhill from there. Luke is strong. He hits things and he can't get hit back, which is something we'll touch on in a second. And I guess it's a cool card back. It's just pow. So Luke is a melee fighter with 13 health. That's not a lot of health. And he has a sidekick named Misty Knight. No relation to Moon Knight, I think. She's ranged and she has 6 health, which is like, it's like you got a sidekick with 6 health. You're like, all right, at least it's not 5, but those don't exist right now. So 6 is like scraping the bottom of the barrel, and they share a move value of 2. So Luke, being like a brawler, as you'll see, he likes to hit things hard. Being move 2, not that great. Having 13 health looks bad, but we'll talk about that in a second. So at least Misty has range, which will provide your team with some sort of capability outside of being the slow and lumbering fisticuffs master that you are. His ability says Luke Cage takes 2 less combat damage from attacks. This does not apply to Misty, it's Luke only. When defending, Luke Cage wins combat if he takes no damage, even if he didn't play a card. So that means if Luke plays a 3 value card on defense, it's really a 5 because he takes 2 less combat damage from attacks. This does not affect other auto damage sources like fatigue or ability pings such as Medusa or Drac, or auto damage. So characters like Invisible Man and Little Red will have a field day because he has 13 health and he's not immune to auto damage like Moon Knight's Khonshu is. So you're really Luke is best when the other character wants to hit them with a lot of attacks, because let's say you get attacked 10 times and you take 10 damage. You're at 3 health, but you effectively blocked 20 damage because each time you were attacked, you blocked 2 of it for free. So I think you have a lot of resistance in that area, a lot of resilience, I should say. It's hard to take you down, especially when characters like Bigfoot kind of have no option but to brute force their way through you. I guess he has jackalope horns, so maybe that wasn't the best example, but my point is that Bruce Lee is going to have a hard time against this character because he has low printed values. Luke wants you to attack him a lot with a bunch of low printed values because he just like won't take that much damage from it. Although I will say his kit is a little bit affected by this ability because obviously if you gave a character like this 4 value blocks, you just wouldn't be able to damage him. So he has no printed values on his cards that he can block with, so versatiles or blues, that are higher than 2. So 2, you're still blocking 4 damage. That's like a good amount of damage to block. A lot of combat winning dependent effects are like their trigger or their like printed value is a 4, like skirmish. So being able to block 4 is a pretty big thing to be able to do as Luke. And your 1 value blocks will be 3 and your 0 value blocks will be 2. So still not horrible, but let's get into the kit and see what exactly his defenses look like. His defensive abilities look like. Sorry, it's 3:20 in the morning. We're just grinding through these videos right now. So before we talk about defense, I guess I'm getting out of order here. We're going to talk about his offense because as you can see from the card back, Luke is going to hit you. He's going to hit you hard, especially around the holidays. Sweet Christmas is a printed 6, no text, and you have 2 copies of it. So it's like the midway point between Larger Than Life and Excalibur. 6 value attacks are good. You don't really need me to tell you that. It's just a solid thing. Wham, you whack them when they're adjacent to Luke. You feel good about that. You say, Sweet Christmas with an exclamation point. Nice. The next card is Commanding Impact. This is an any, so Misty Knight can use this from range, which is really good because it's a 5 value attack, and it's a good one because it replaces itself in your hand after you play it. This is in Sinbad's deck. He has 1 copy of it. You have 3. It's just good. This deck wants to draw cards because you have a lot of big attacks that you want to be constantly throwing at your enemy. You want to be pressuring them, I think, because while you are pretty defensively abled, you're not going to survive in the long game, especially if your opponent has auto damage, and fatigue just wrecks a character with 13 health. So you want to hit hard before your opponent hits you harder. And this card lets you do that by not putting you at a hand disadvantage after combat because your hand size will stay the same. Hopefully your opponent's goes down if they block, and if they don't block, well, you just landed 5 damage. From range, that's insane. And it's even really good against feint because it's still 3 damage over that. Very solid kit so far, what we're looking at here. The next is Get Paid. This is Luke Cage specific, so maybe we'll put it like that. And it's a 4 value attack. It says, after combat, if you won the combat, draw 2 cards. So, depending on the matchup, of course, you'll probably win the combat more often than not with a 4 value attack. And that's good because you, like I just said with Commanding Impact, you generally want to draw cards as this character because you want to be able to hit hard. And especially drawing 2 cards at once lets you hit hard for longer. You only have 2 copies of this, which I think is fine because drawing 6 cards, in addition to the 3 from this, that's just a little too much. Like, you don't want to go super fast. You want to keep your hand size pretty beefy, and I guess Get Paid helps you do that. Although with other big value attacks in your deck, 5s and 6s, your opponent is probably going to throw out a decent sized block whenever they can. So this might not trigger that often. And in my games, in my experience, it actually hasn't triggered that often just because your opponent is probably going to value block you a lot. And this isn't really that good when your opponent is intentionally trying to value block you. The next card is Hero for Hire. It's another Luke Cage specific card. It's similar to Moon Knight's That's Why I Always Win, I believe, and Medusa's Second Shot. It's just a 3-value attack that you can boost. So looking at the boost values right now, nothing too special in particular. You can make it a 5 with Get Paid. We'll re-examine this more later when we see the possibilities that this could be with the other boost values in your deck. But having this option is decent, especially because you'll get to boost after you see what your opponent played, and if they have any defensive during combat effects that increase the value of it, you can always decide not to boost. And I like the dichotomy going on so far, where you have this card that your opponent kind of wants to feint, maybe even this card, and then some cards that your opponent does not want to feint because they'll take a bunch of damage, and that just having some mind game in there will help you potentially land big hits or avoid wasting resources depending on what your opponent blocks, whether it's big values or cancels. The next card is Still Standing, and any card that says if you won the combat, so another 4-value combat dependent effect trigger, choose 2 cards in your discard pile and shuffle them into your deck. This is a great form of recursion. You get 2 cards from your discard pile and you get to shuffle them back into your deck, which is nice because now it actually helps you delay exhaustion by a turn. It kind of nullifies or neutralizes, I should say, that's a better word. It kind of cancels out the rapid drawing you might be getting with other cards, and you just get to recycle 2 really good cards. So this is another card we'll examine later after we've seen more cards, where we can talk about what you would potentially want to shuffle back into your deck from your discard pile. It also counters Fiery Eyes at Sea. The next card is Where's My Money? This is my favorite card in the deck, specifically because whenever I play it, I yell, "Where's my money?" blank, where blank is the opponent that I'm playing. So I've said, "Where's my money, Gary?" more times than I ever thought I would in my life. Where's my money, freak? I know you have my money. Where is it? Place Luke Cage adjacent to the nearest opposing fighter. Kind of like, I almost said beast form, kind of like mist form, but a little bit more specific, where it has to be the nearest opposing fighter, and you can place yourself adjacent to them, which means if you're already next to an opposing fighter, you can just place yourself in a different space that's adjacent to them. And if two fighters are equidistant from you, you get to choose. You can choose any space adjacent to them, and you gain 1 action. So it's very much similar to mist form in the sense that you just teleport across the board, and then you have an action, maybe 2 if you played this first, to just smack them, which is really good for a move 2 character with not a ton of mobility that can warp to you with Where's My Money, and then smack you, and smack you again. Really good. It's really good against solo fighters, solo heroes, I should say, like Moon Knight or Bloody Mary or Bruce Lee, because they're the only fighter on the board, so they're always the most adjacent fighter. So maybe if you're playing against someone with a sidekick, you beat that sidekick into submission first so that this will always trigger on your opponent's hero. Interesting thing to think about in your game strategy. The first defense card is Trash Talk. It's a 2-value any, and it says immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's card. So it's very similar to Feint, except this can only be played on defense. It says after combat, if you won the combat, end the turn, which is really, really good. So it's just like a Feint if you play it for Misty Knight. So it's probably not going to end the turn that often, because Feint's biggest weakness is that it's not a high-value card, so you're trading health for canceling an effect. Usually that's a good trade, especially on something like Beast Form or Forever Hide. This says after combat, if you won the combat, end the turn. So with Luke, with your ability, this is a 4. It's a 4-value Feint, like Super Feint from Deadpool's deck. And I've gone on record saying that if that card was not in Deadpool's deck, it would be one of the best cards in the game, because being able to cancel and value block at the same time is really good. Of course, Super Feint also draws a card. This doesn't, but it also ends the turn early for your opponent. So if Bruce Lee attacks you with a 3-value Jeep, you block it, you don't take any damage, so you win the combat, and you just end the turn, which means your opponent could potentially get cheated out of an action. That's nice. This usually won't matter if you're playing against like a melee character that just maneuvers in and hits you and doesn't really have action gain. But this is going to be really useful against combo characters like Bruce Lee or the Raptors because it can end their turn short. And it is a defensive after combat effect, so it triggers before offensive after combat effects, which means whatever effect was on your opponent's attack card, if it happens after combat, it doesn't happen anymore because the turn ends. It just cuts the combat short. So this actually stops, I think, Robin Hood's ability, which is an after combat ability, but it does not stop Bigfoot or Bruce Lee or Moon Knight switching phases because those are like end of turn checks. And this like triggers the end of the turn, but I could be wrong about that. Check the pinned rules archive in the Discord. The next defense card, this isn't any, is Skin Like Titanium. After combat, if you lost the combat, which you will with a 0 value block card, deal damage to the opposing fighter equal to the amount of combat damage you took. So this is kind of like Wukong's Golden Chainmail, except you both take the damage that you take in this. Whereas in Golden Chainmail, the attacker gets the damage reflected back onto them. So this is a little bit more balanced than that card. This card is interesting because it's effectively a 2 value block for Luke. So you're probably going to take at least 2 damage every time you use it, which means you have to use it while you have health. If you have 3 health and you're using this card, that's a little risky. So you kind of have to use your health as a resource early in the game. Take the big hit, but you deal some back to your opponent, and hopefully you can use your offensive weapons to use that little bit of momentum and hit them first. It kind of reminds me of Equal of Grendel, pick one, don't say both. Reminds me of Equal of Grendel from Beowulf's deck. Just something that reflects damage back onto your opponent. And it's a good card in the first half of the game, I'll say. With 13 health, you don't really have a lot of room to take huge hits, so it's just something you have to be aware of. The next card is Power Man. It's a 2 value blue. Actually, this has 2 copies. This has 3 copies. Okay, so it's like a standard feint. You have 2 copies of this. So far, we're at 7 block cards. So it's basically a 4 when you're using it. After combat, move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces. You may move them through other opposing fighters. Deal 1 damage to them and each opposing fighter they move through. So this kind of reminds me of Cartwheel Kick from Buffy's deck. It's really good if your opponent has 1 health sidekicks because, I mean, if they're attacking you, they die from this effect. And if their hero is attacking you and there are some 1 health sidekicks behind their hero, you push their hero through the 1 health sidekicks and everyone involved gets pinged for 1, which will kill the sidekicks. I was about to say everyone involved dies, but that's just not true if they're the hero. This is good, especially in this deck, because you want to hit things big. You want to hit things for a lot of damage. You want to pound the hero into the dust. You don't want to waste your big attacks on 1 health sidekicks. So this card lets you deal with them very efficiently, especially if they're all clumped together. Your opponent will probably play around this positionally, but I guess dealing 1 damage back to the thing that just attacked you is fine. It's kind of like a better Wily fighting. We're now going into Misty's cards. She can use Trash Talk, which is basically a feint for her, still standing and commanding impact. So far, very solid package. She has Daughter of the Dragon. During combat, if Misty Knight is adjacent to the opposing fighter, the value of this card is 6 instead. So it's kind of like Right Hand Man from Buffy and Xander. It's a versatile 2 that goes to a 6. So this is a really good option for Misty if the opponent is coming in to melee range to attack her because she can block with a 6. It's kind of like Duality of Man. She can also block with something else like the feint or whatever. Trash Talk. Favorite art from this character, by the way. And maybe she feints them and then just smacks them with this. on your turn for a 6, which is just another big attack in your deck. So the one thing is, this is an attack that is bad when it's fainted. Normally everything else is just fine. You want these to be fainted so that you can deal 4, 3, or 2 damage over your opponent's feint. So I would mix up Commanding Impact with this card if you're gonna use it offensively, because getting this fainted and dealing no damage, not the best feeling in the world. So maybe you use it on defense as a way to keep Misty alive, because I think you need to keep Misty alive. I've played a couple games of Luke where Misty dies really early, and I think that's not good. I think that's really bad, and my success in those games has not been very good. So I would recommend keeping Misty alive. So this is actually a really good way to keep her alive with a 6 value block, whereas, as you'll see, otherwise she doesn't really have that many good options for blocking. You have 2 copies of this, which you kind of hate to see, but it's a really powerful card, so it makes sense why you only have 2. The next Misty card is Pushback. It's another 2 value versatile. It says, after combat, move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces. So if you're using this on defense, it's a 2 value block for a character that only has 6 health, which isn't really that good, but the after combat effect could be useful for adjusting your opponent's positioning, especially if you're playing this on defense. You move them into Luke, and now it's the start of your turn, and you can attack them because they're adjacent to Luke when they otherwise wouldn't be. It's also like the Fist of Khonshu for Moon Knight, where you can move your opposing fighter. Actually, you can only move the opposing fighter. So on maps like Baskerville or Raptor Paddock, or any of the Marvel maps with items, or Hanging Gardens, where map effects matter more, being able to basically screw with your opponent's positioning is a really powerful effect. I guess it's also fine from range, because you can attack with it and move them too. Just try not to get it fainted. Which, if Misty is attacking the enemy from range, they're probably not going to faint, because it could be Daughter of the Dragon, and it could be something like these, and they want to value block these. They don't really want to cancel Commanding Impact. I guess they might want to cancel Still Standing, because that's a really powerful card. The next card is Got My Back, another Misty Knight card. It's a 1 value block. Not great for a 6 health sidekick who's very squishy, but the effect is immediately, right now, right this instant, clean your room, young man. Sorry, that's some personal trauma coming up. Immediately, Misty Knight may swap spaces with Luke Cage. If she does, Luke Cage is now the defender. And I love how you can see Luke in the background of this card, just looking like an absolute menace. So this is like Under Achilles' Helm, where Achilles can swap with Pat. The heroes can put the sidekick in danger. This is the opposite of that. The sidekick is putting the hero in danger. But it's fine, because if Misty and Luke swap, well, for one, Luke is adjacent to the opposing fighter, which means he's in a better position to put the hurt on them. And 2, it means that Luke is now blocking for 3. 3. Instead of Misty blocking for just 1. You can choose not to swap after seeing the enemy's attack. I think most of the time you will, because 1 value is not good to block with, and Misty can probably take like 1 or 2 hits max, and this is just not a good way to keep her alive. So actually, the more that I'm talking about this, I think you actually end up using at least 1 copy of Daughter of the Dragon on defense, just keeping her alive, because she is very squishy. I guess this is this is more of like a Luke block than a Misty block. It basically just swaps them out, but I guess your opponent could put you in a tough position where they put something like a Beast Form or a Forever Hide on Misty when they think you'll play this card, and then I guess you have the tough choice of just letting Misty take the damage and just die, or having Luke tank it and just put himself at a really low health total while keeping a sidekick alive. So I like this card. It just puts you in a dangerous situation, and a lot of times hurting Luke means you'll just lose quicker. So not sure how I feel about it, but it depends on what other defensive options you have in your hand. it's a good card. Don't get me wrong, it's a good card. And the last card is Regroup. Regroup's trash, Baked Goods. What are you talking about? This is one of the best cards in your deck because it's a 3-value block for Luke, and it actually has a chance of winning the combat and drawing 2 cards, which, as we've seen, you want to draw cards as Luke because you want to put the hurt on your opponent faster than they put the hurt on you. And potentially winning the combat on defense with this is a great way to get your hand size back up and give you more options. It also, I guess, it can be an attack from range for Misty. You can block with it for Misty, but I don't recommend doing that because she's going to die. You can attack with it for Luke and try to bait out a big value block before you hit them with something harder. So let's go back. Let's talk about Hero for Hire. You can boost it. The cards you're probably going to want to boost with this are Pushback, which you have 2 copies of, but it's a boost value 3, and Regroup, which you have 3 copies of, and it's a boost value 3. So you have 5 cards in your deck that can get this up to a 6. You're probably not really going to want to boost it with 1s, and depending on what your opponent plays, I guess you can put a 2 into it if you're so inclined. And Still Standing, what are you going to recycle? I really like recycling Trash Talks because it's a 4-value feint, and it'll slow a lot of enemy decks down, especially getting 4 or 5 cancels. We've seen how Achilles, if he can recycle 5 feints with 2 copies, if he can recycle 2 feints for a total of 5 with his 2 copies of Battle Hardened, that can really put a dent in your opponent's offensive plans, especially if they're in effects-based decks. If they're in effect-based deck, like Sinbad or Little Red, just having extra feints never hurt. You can cycle back Sweet Christmas and Commanding Impact for even more offensive pressure. And you can even take some of Misty's cards back, depending on if she's alive. And after you play your first copy of this, on the second copy, because there's only 2, you can pick the other Still Standing as one of the cards and cycle in a different card so that you kind of have a loop going, kind of like how Achilles does sometimes with Battle Hardened. So overall, I actually think this deck has the best potential to be meta out of the 3 for Redemption Row, simply because he's more consistent than Moon Knight, and I don't want to talk about Ghost Rider, but he has clear weaknesses. 13 health with no immunity to effect damage. Characters like Invisible Man and Little Red are going to eat him alive. And characters like Sherlock, Bigfoot, and Medusa, the big 3 right now, they all have a decent amount of auto damage. Yanenga has a decent amount of auto damage. Achilles might just be able to hit over you. So, if we're looking at the heroes that are very popular right now, the cream of the crop, I don't think Luke does well into. And there are some other heroes, like I mentioned, Invisible Man, but also like Jekyll and Hyde, that have good matchups into him. So he will be very matchup dependent, but I think the heroes that don't have a plethora of auto damage will not be that good into him because he can stop their effects, he can punish them for playing big values, he can deal with their sidekicks, and he can just hit them hard for days. And he has the card draw to support kind of like a mid-range play style where I guess you don't really last that long in the long game with low value blocks, but you can if Still Standing is triggering and putting more cards back into your deck, delaying fatigue. But I don't necessarily think you're the most aggressive fighter just because your mobility stinks outside of this card and maybe this card. But I personally like Luke more than the other 2 fighters from this set. So if there was anyone I was going to adopt as like a main, I guess, it would be Luke. But right now, I think Bruce is in that spot. So Luke is probably not cracking my top 5 favorite fighters in the game, but he's in my top 10 for sure. So that's what I think about Luke. Please let me know what you think about what I thought about Luke in the comments. If I got something wrong, if I got something right, and you want to let me know, please. I'd love to have a conversation because, like I said, these are my first impressions. They're probably not accurate. Take them with a grain of salt, and it's just a fun exercise to analyze some of the new characters in the game. So that's it for my first impressions of this character, and this is actually the third video I'm recording, so that's it for this set. Like I said, Moon Knight and Ghost Rider, they have their own videos, so go check those out if you want to. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!